Hey guys, welcome back to Classic Album Reviews. It's me, Mike. Okay, now, today is a very special review because it is the 50th anniversary of the day the Beatles played the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time back in 1964. The first time they came to the U.S. Now, alright, now first off, let me say this. The Beatles are my favorite band of all time. They are the greatest band of all time. I mean, every rock band that there is today, they wouldn't even be here if it weren't for the Beatles. They are the greatest band of all time. They are so like innovative and creative. You know, with all the albums that they made, they, they were one of the first artists to write their own material, so they were influential for that reason. And so, and that is the reason why they are my favorite band. So, okay, so with that, let's start the review. Okay, now, 1963, the Beatles were signed to Parlophone Records and they released their debut album, Please Please Me, which features I Saw Her Standing There, sung by Paul, Misery, Anna Go to Him, Chains, Boys, Ask Me Why, Please Please Me, Love Me Do, their first single, P.S. I Love You, Baby It's You, Do You Want to Know a Secret, A Taste of Honey, There Is a Place, and Twist and Shout. This is a great album, it has a lot of songs written by John and Paul and like six cover songs. This was their first album that introduced the Beatles to all of Britain, and then their second album, which I don't own a physical copy of, was with the Beatles, released that same year, 1963. It featured It Won't Be Long, All My Lovin', Till There Was You, Roll Over Beethoven, Please, Mr. Postman. Um, um, it was a really great album. Um, 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 Released during the time of Beatlemania in England and before Beatlemania was about to begin in America. February 9th, 1964, the Beatles came to America for the first time, played the Ed Sullivan Show with 70 million viewers, watcher. That started the British invasion. After the Beatles, a lot of other British bands started coming to the U.S., like the Stones, uh, Dave Clark Five, Herman's Hermits, The Animals, The Who. A lot of British bands started coming over, and they wrote their own songs too. So that was great. 1964, the Beatles made their first movie, A Hard Day's Night, uh, which was released with the soundtrack album, which featured the title track, I Should Have Known Better, um, If I Fell, um, I'm Happy Just to Dance with You, Can't Buy Me Love. It's a great album. Features all original songs by Lennon and McCartney. 1964, the end of 1964 saw the release of Beatles for Sale, which features Mr. Moonlight, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, Honey Don't, I'll Follow the Sun, just a lot of great songs on there, you know, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black. Um, 1965, the Beatles made their second movie, Help, which featured the title track, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, Yesterday, and Ticket to Ride, and a lot of other great songs, and it signaled a kind of change in direction from the Beatles because they started writing like more folk songs. And then at the end of that year, 1965, they released the very influential album Rubber Soul. This was a very, very big departure from what the Beatles were used to because before all they wrote was they just wrote like straightforward songs like I Love You Girl and stuff just and on on Rubber Soul the lyrics went much more like deeper, they had like more deeper meaning like the like the word, and then there was Nowhere Man, which had this like kind of like abstract meaning, and then there's In My Life, which is like which was like the turning point for Lennon McCartney's writing, because it was like like very like introspective. This album saw the Beatles like kind of like maturing, getting into like different like musical themes and stuff, and this album was also influential because it inspired another musician, Brian Wilson, leader of the Beach Boys, to make the Beach Boys masterpiece Pet Sounds in 1966. Because this was like the first album that like saw the album as an art form, because albums before they were just a collection of singles. This album, it had a theme, all good songs, all of them had to do with each other, and other albums they just had filler, so this was a really great album, very influential. 1966 saw the Beatles getting more experimental with Revolver. This was their first like foray into psychedelic music. With Eleanor Rigby, Taxman, I'm Only Sleeping, um, Love You Too, which saw George Harrison using like Indian instruments and like Indian themes and stuff like that. She said, and then there's um uh uh Tomorrow Never Knows, so which has like a lot of uh, big experimentation, using tape loops and backwards guitars and stuff, very, very innovative, for its time, no other artists were doing this, so the Beatles were like the one of the first to do stuff like this, very psychedelic, and this album was kind of like a preview for what was to come in the next year. So after Revolver, the Beatles, they decided to quit touring and just and focus on being in the studio and just recording, because after Revolver, they had started doing stuff in the studio that they realized that they couldn't do on stage, all this experimentation, and so touring was becoming like painstaking for them. They couldn't tour anymore, and so August of '66 they decided to quit touring. They did their last concert at Candlestick Park, and went their separate ways for like a while. Then November of 1966, they went back to the studio, started recording their next album, and the first song that they recorded for the album was Strawberry Fields, which ended up not being on the album, but it was still released as a single. And so they spent the next year of 67 recording their next album, which would become their masterpiece. June 1st, 1967, the Beatles released what many say is their best and the greatest album of all time, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This album is a huge, huge step forward than from what the Beatles had been doing before. Huge, huge step. The lyrics. The music, the experimentation. This album heralded the psychedelic era. This was released at the Summer of Love, when you had the flower power, a psychedelic movement. A lot of bands were getting into that psychedelic groove, taking LSD. Um, this album is great, has Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the title track, with a little help from my friends, sung by Ringo. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, great song. It's a masterpiece. Some people say there's that rumor that LSD, but I don't really believe that. It's not true. Um, I'm getting better. Fixing a hole. She's leaving home. Great, beautiful song. With the string arrangement being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. Nice organ solos in there. Um, uh, Within You, Without You, again, George Harrison, like experimenting with those Eastern, um, Indian themes, with the sitars and the other Indian instruments, When I'm 64, Paul McCartney, kind of like a big band swing kind of 1930s era song. Lovely Rita, great song. Um, Good Morning, Good Morning. Uh, the Sgt. Pepper reprise, and then the last track, the magnum opus of the whole album, A Day in the Life. This is the Beatles' masterpiece. This is their best song. This is really a masterpiece. Really, really a great masterpiece. It starts off, all like somber. It has like John Lennon playing piano and singing and uh, uh, singing about the news that he reads, and then there's this big like instrumental classical break. Cuts to Paul McCartney with this really upbeat, poppy uh, side, talking about his morning routine, and then it ends with that big crashing one piano chord. This is a great album, and it had huge fanfare when it was released in June of '67. Great album. This is a masterpiece. If you're studying music, you should definitely listen to this album. You should study this album. This this album is necessary to have in your album collection. Great album. Just uh, there, there's nothing more to say, but it's the greatest album of all time. Then that same year, the the Beatles um, went further into their psychedelic mood with Magical Mystery Tour, and it was also their third movie. Yeah, Magical Mystery Tour, which just featured like some songs that they recorded. Obviously, the most famous song here is "I Am the Walrus." You know, great song by Lennon. You know, really psychedelic, cool song. You know, and it also features other singles that they released that year, like "Strawberry Fields Forever," "Hello Goodbye," "Penny Lane," "Baby You're a Rich Man," "All You Need Is Love." You know, this is a really great album. You know, the even though the movie flopped, you know, it was their first flop, but I still like the album. It's a it's a really good album. 1968. Well, oh yeah, but anyway, 1967. After Sergeant Pepper and everything, the Beatles took a trip to India and studied uh, they studied meditation with Maharishi and started writing songs down there. And that was also after their manager Brian Epstein died. You know, so they were kind of feeling like they didn't know what to do. They were feeling kind of directionless since Brian had died. You know, so Paul he kind of became the de facto leader, and he kind of became the de facto leader of the group. You know, he kind of held the group um that he kind of held the group together until they broke up. You know, and 1968 saw big changes. You know, they started their own record label, Apple Records. You know, and they also released a single, "Hey Jude," which became like their best-selling single of all time, I believe. And that was also the year that John Lennon started dating Yoko Ono. You know, she would become a very important part of his life and a part of the Beatles' career during that time. 1968 was the year the Beatles released their self-titled album, also known as the White Album. You know, this album is really great. You know, it has like great songs. You know, it's a two CD album. It's a two CD album. You know, and this album kind of finds the Beatles kind of like yeah. Let's see. This is the album that I kind of showed the Beatles kind of breaking apart, even though they hadn't broken up yet. On this album, you could kind of tell that they were breaking up, you know, because a lot of the songs they had they had recorded alone, you know, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. They kind of like recorded most of the songs separate, and yeah, but uh but a lot of the songs they did together. You know, and as you can see, you know, on the back cover, you know, there's just four separate photos of them, you know, but this is a great album, you know, with Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, John Lennon, Glass Onion, Obla Di, Obla Da, great kind of um, like ska type of song, Wild Honey Pie, Bungle Bill, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which features Eric Clapton on a lead guitar. Yeah, and Happiness is a Warm Gun. That's one of my favorite songs I hear. Martha My Dear, I'm So Tired, Blackbird, Piggies, Rocky Raccoon, Don't Pass Me By, Why Don't We Do in the Road, I Will, Julia, Birthday, Year Blues, Mother Nature's Son, Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey, Sexy Sadie, uh, Helter Skelter, Long, 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 Revolution 1, Honey Pie, Savoy Truffle, Cry Baby Cry, and then there's Revolution 9, which kind of like which also like kind of signified John Lennon's uh, a kind of a musical direction away from the like kind of conventional stuff he was doing with the Beatles, and he had started dating Yoko at the time, and so she had a big influence on the music he started making at the time, and the music, they started getting like a really experimental for him, because there isn't like much lyrics, and it's not really really like that melodic. It's kind of like a collage of sounds. But this is a great album by the Beatles. A great album, but it kind of like foreshadowed what was going to come for them. Then um 1968, the Beatles made their fourth movie, Yellow Submarine, which was a cartoon, and a great movie. You know, they also released the soundtrack album for it in early '69. So then, January '69, after the White Album, the Beatles decided to get in the studio and do another album. This time they decided that they'd get back to their roots, and just make a simple album, with no studio experimentation or anything. Just straightforward, getting back to their roots album. And so the idea was to that they were going to record the album, and while they were going to record it, they were going to make a documentary. Excuse me. They were going to make a documentary about the making of that album. Where they'd record in the studio, and then they'd practice the songs in the film studio. They'd do the songs, and then at the end they were gonna do a concert, and it was meant to show how they worked together in the studio, but instead it just showed them breaking up. They were fighting a lot, but it was still a good movie, and at the end they had their famous rooftop concert, which was the last concert that they ever did. The album uh, was originally called Get Back. They recorded it in early '69. But the recording was getting bad for them. Because they were fighting a lot. Yoko was with John all the time. And the other Beatles got sick and tired of that. So they just had a lot of fights. But in mid '69, they decided to put all that stuff behind them, and that they were going to get back in that they were going to get back in the studio and do one more album after they had put Get Back the album Get Back on the shelves for a while. So mid '69, they got back in the studio and started recording Abbey Road. And then so in September '69, the Beatles released Abbey Road. This is a great album. Shows the Beatles shows the Beatles um working together. Like they did in the old days. Has great songs. Come together. Something. Maxwell's Silver Hammer, Oh Darlin', Octopus's Garden, sung and written by Ringo. Um, I Want You, She's So Heavy, which was actually the last song that the all four Beatles recorded together. Here Comes the Sun, um, um, because You Never Give Me Your Money, Sun King, and then there's the Abbey Road medley, Mean Mr. Mustard, um, Polythene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, Go to Slumbers, Carry That Weight, The End, which is a great song. The song, The End, it shows off all the Beatles' talents. All all four of them get a solo. Uh, John, Paul, and George each do a guitar solo, and Ringo gets a drum solo. Great song. Then at the end there's Her Majesty. This is a really great album, but sadly it was also the people didn't know it at the time, and the Beatles didn't even know either. But this was the last album that the Beatles recorded together. Yeah, they had started doing Let It Be in early '69, but they shelved it for a while, and so Abbey Road was the last album that the Beatles recorded. So after that, John married Yoko, Paul married Linda, and after they did Abbey Road, John secretly told the other guys that he was leaving the band and that he was going solo, but he didn't tell the media. He just kept it quiet for a while. So then, early 70, early 1970, the matter of what to do with Let It Be came up. They wondered what they were gonna do with Let It Be, and so they got legendary producer Phil Spector to uh, help put the album together to make it into a full album. And so, but then Paul, George, and Ringo went into the studio to finish one song on the album, which was George's song "I Me Mine." And so the album was finished. But then April 10th, 1970, Paul made an announcement that he was leaving the Beatles and that the Beatles were officially over. The Beatles were officially over and that he was going to release a solo album. And like I think a week after that, Let It Be was released, the last album that the Beatles released, which had been recorded just a year earlier. You know, their this was their final album. Be, and after that, Paul had uh, done his solo album. John did his solo album. George and Ringo, yeah, they all went solo, and they enjoyed widely successful solo careers. Yeah, throughout the '70s, 1980, sad year. John Lennon was murdered outside his home. John Lennon was murdered outside his home, and but then 15 years after that, but then 15 years after that, um Paul, George, and Ringo got together, made the anthology documentary, and they put out two songs. The first songs the Beatles had released in like a quarter century. You know, Real Love and Free as a Bird. Yeah, and so and then sadly in 2001 we lost George to lung cancer, and so now it's just Paul and Ringo, and they still have very successful solo careers. Yeah. So yeah, the Beatles, they still are the greatest band of all time, the biggest selling artist of all time, with the greatest album ever made. N- Neither uh, all these bands today wouldn't exist if it weren't for the Beatles. Very innovative and creative. And so also tune into CBS tonight to watch. Tune into CBS tonight to watch a very special to watch the TV special, the the night that changed America, about the about when the Beatles um first played the Ed Sullivan Show. This has been Classic Album Reviews. See you guys later.